The state of Texas spends a lot of money each year on things such as education, healthcare, and protection services. The funding for these programs comes from the annual Texas revenues. Of the roughly $182 billion Texas had in revenues in 2011, only about 43% of it came from taxes. The other $100 billion or so came from non-tax revenues. Non-tax revenues can be split into two main groups, which are federal grants and aids and state bonds. Federal grants and aids also come in two forms, categorical and block grants. Through categorical grants, Congress appropriates funds for a specific purpose and sets up a formula for their distribution. While with block grants, Congress still appropriates funds for a much more general purpose, but it is left to the receiving government or the state government to determine exactly how to spend those funds. In more recent years, the frequency of block grants has grown as compared to categorical grants, and this has led to the slight de-evolution of power from the federal to state governments. The majority of non-tax revenue funds comes from grants. However, a large sum also comes from state bonds. There are two main types of state bonds, the general obligation bond and the revenue bond. Funds from the general obligation bonds are used for services such as water development and prison construction. Funds from these bonds are repaid through general revenue, like taxes. And in most cases, general obligation bonds must be approved by voters before they can be issued. However, revenue bonds do not have to be approved by voters, and fundings for these bonds are repaid through the services that they are funding. An example of this could be higher education. If the bond was funding higher education, it would be repaid through the tuition to pay the higher education. State funding can come in many forms other than taxes. Two of these other forms are federal grants and aids and state bonds. The majority of non-tax revenue comes from grants, which is around 36% of total state funds. However, bonds also play a key role in state revenues. Though there are other non-tax revenue sources, like the lottery, fines and fees, and the sale of public land, these sources only account for a minute amount of the total state revenues.